guys, Matt here with BuiltRight Industries. If you watched our last Rivian video, you saw me install our Cab Wall MOLLE panel on our R1T here. And just a couple of days ago, my Rivian MAXTRAX Extreme Recovery Kit showed up. I'm pretty excited about these parts. We're going to use them along with a set of the BuiltRight MOLLE Nuts to install them on our panel. So let's get into it. So a quick rundown on what we're looking at here. Of course, these are the recovery boards themselves, along with their leash. We've got the plastic composite mounts. This is a Rivian MAXTRAX collaboration. These are the mounts. They're also going to come with a set of mounting pins. Rivian includes an interesting kind of T-slot stud. These are meant to be used with the Rivian crossbars. We have those crossbars, but we're of course mounting these to our MOLLE panel, so I'm going to set those inside in case we want them in the future. And then we've got a set of the BuiltRight Industries MOLLE Nuts. That's going to contain 4 of the MOLLE Nuts along with all the other hardware you're going to need to finish this installation along with me. Now let's take a quick look at the tools that we need and we'll get on with it. All right, so this installation is very straightforward. We're going to need a wrench of some sort for the mounting pin set. I'll explain that a bit in a minute. And then we need a 3/8" socket and a ratchet to install the MOLLE Nuts. All right, so we're bringing our attention back to our MAXTRAX mounting kit here. I'm going to remove these because we're just not going to need those. And then I'm going to open up my mounting pin set. Now you've got 4 identical pins. Each pin should have a nut pre-installed on it. I'm going to take that nut off. And then there's a washer here. We will not be needing that washer, so I'm going to set this aside with the T-slot nuts and just focus on these 2 pieces. All right, so now looking at these composite brackets, you can see we've got a spot on the back here to hold our nut captive. These nuts have a nylock locking ring in them. We want to make sure that nylock ring, as we place the nut in there, is facing us. And then I'm going to hold this in place with my thumb, come to the other side, and begin carefully threading the mounting pin into that. As soon as those threads hit the nylock portion, which is where we're at right now, you're going to feel some resistance. I can turn it a little bit with my hands. And here's where we're going to want that wrench. You may use a crescent wrench, pliers like I'm using. You don't want to mar up this plastic too badly, but this will work just fine. And then I'm going to spin this to tighten that into place. Okay, so now I've got this tight. You can see on the composite bracket here, there are a couple of sort of witness marks. That's going to help us line up this bracket to be straight. This is going to make sense once the parts are in your hands. But I'm just going to back that off a little bit just to get us lined up straight there. And we're in good shape. All right, so we've got 1 of the pins installed. I'm going to go ahead and complete the same process with the other 3. Again, ensuring that my nylock nut there is facing the right direction and that I end up aligning the mounting pins with those witness marks that I mentioned earlier, so that our locking features are nice and straight. All right, so before we get started with installing these, I wanted to give you a quick background on how these 2 go together. Obviously, this mount matches the shape of your MAXTRAX nicely. As we put the MAXTRAX onto the mount, it's going to sink down like that. I would put my second on there, and then to lock it into place, I would turn it like that, 90 degrees on both of these, repeat that on the other end, and then we're locked into place. So now we're going to go ahead, we're going to mount both of these mounts to the MOLLE panel. So the last thing we want to do is make sure that we're mounting these 2 mounts the correct distance apart without having the board in our way. MAXTRAX calls that 890 millimeters. I know that to be about 35 inches, and I'm just going to verify with my tape measure here that indeed that is about 35 inches. So that is what we'll shoot for. With our MOLLE Nuts, it's easy to make micro adjustments, and you'll see that when we get to the MOLLE panel. All right, so I've got my MAXTRAX up against the MOLLE panel here. As you can see, we've got some room to be creative. I think long-term I'm gonna mount my MAXTRAX board on my favoring the passenger side, so that on the driver's side I can mount a pouch. But for right now, and for the purpose of this video, so you guys get a good clean look, I'm gonna try and mount it right centered on the panel. Something like that, up a little bit higher off the bed. So I'm gonna hop in the bed, we'll mock up the mounts, and then we'll bolt them to the panel. All right, so obviously I've got the panel here. I'm using my tape measure here to look and find kind of where 35 inches is about centered. It looks like, for me, that means that the mounting pins, about 1, 2, 3, is about centered on the third MOLLE rectangle here. So now that I know kind of where I'm gonna want my mounts, I'm gonna move this first board out of the way. And I know that I'm gonna want my mount approximately centered over this third MOLLE feature, and kind of centered on the panel, so something like that. I'm gonna mock it up, and I'm shooting for something kind of like that. These MAXTRAX mounts are great with all the slots and the holes. I know I'm gonna be able to find a place where these line up nicely. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna open up our MOLLE nut package here. So I've removed some of the excess hardware from the MOLLE nut kit, just to make it a little bit easier to see. But for each side, I'm gonna use 2 MOLLE nuts. I'm gonna use 2 of the 5/8 inch bolts. And I'm gonna use 2 of the washers. I'll set the remaining MOLLE nut hardware aside. All right, so the first step, when I have this mocked up, I'm gonna take a look into these slots and try and see where I can get a good clean line of sight on somewhere around the center of one of our MOLLE rectangles. And I may shift it over a little bit. I think I've got a good opportunity right here in these kind of outside slots and this feature right here. So for reference, if you're wanting to do these in your own panels, that is 2 over and 3 down from the mounting bolt here. All right, so my next step is I'm gonna put a bolt through the washer. So I know I'm gonna use this slot here, and what I'm gonna do on this first MOLLE nut is flip it over. I'm gonna get it started with the step facing our mount. Just a few threads, enough so that it's not gonna fall. Something like that. And then I'm gonna fish it through, again, 2 over, 3 down, so that the MOLLE nut is sideways. And then I'm gonna spin the bolt to bring the MOLLE nut 90 degrees and put some tension on it so that it's not gonna spin again. And then I'm gonna tighten this down. I'll use my socket here to do that. And I'm looking to tighten it down just enough that the MOLLE nut can't fall back out of the feature and spin, but not quite so much that I can't move it around. That will make sense once you are doing this. So now that I've got this in place, I know I'm approximately shooting for that kind of a location. I've got another spot down here where I can fish a MOLLE nut back behind here with my finger. And then I will grab the other bolt and washer and get that started. I apologize if this is a little bit difficult to see. You and I are in the same boat in that respect. So I've got our MOLLE nut started on this bottom one as well. I'm spinning that 90 degrees, get it into the MOLLE feature, and then I will snug it up. Once again, leaving it just loose enough that I've got some adjustment here. You're gonna see why in a minute. All right, so we're on to our second mount here. Again, refresher. We want the pin to be about on this third, centered on the third feature there. So I'm gonna repeat our process from the previous mount, which is to use these outside slots. I'm gonna get a MOLLE nut started on the top one. If you're feeling sporty, you can get one started on the bottom and you can manage to maneuver them in, but I'm gonna keep it a little bit simple. All right, if we want the pin to be on the third feature here, we know from the other side, 2 over, 3 down, so the MOLLE nut's gonna go right here. I'm gonna get it started in here. Once again, I will twist it 90 degrees, let it find its home, and then tighten it down just enough that it doesn't fall out of its spot, just like that. I'm gonna grab our next bolt and washer and MOLLE nut. Make sure this is straight, eyeball where that needs to go. And I'm gonna land down in this feature here. All right, so before I put in the final MOLLE nut on that side, I'm gonna set the recovery board in here just to check our measurement, because I can see up here that we're a little bit close together, and sure enough, I'm seeing that here too. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move the recovery board. We're gonna pick a different MOLLE feature for this MOLLE nut to go in to get this bracket over towards the passenger side, just about a 1/2 inch, and they'll be all set. I need this to be a little bit over from that. So I'm actually gonna use this slot this time, 2 over 3 down, and try that. All right, so this part of the installation is kind of gonna change for everybody depending on where you put your MAXTRAX. If you want it in the exact same spot as I do here, then we'll be able to just tell you exactly where to put the MOLLE nut. I've got this top one in. I'm gonna go ahead and do the bottom one right here, and then we'll give us another test fit. Yeah, that's gonna be it, I think. All right, so we just tested that board. Everything fit up great. Now we're gonna snug these up on both sides, put both boards on, and we'll be all set. All right, so now that this is all done and mounted up here, just a quick refresher. In both cases, our MOLLE nut was 2 features over and 3 down from the mounting point. The only thing that differed between the driver and the passenger side is which of the 2 slot options we used in the mount itself. But again, this is an installation that's gonna vary for everybody, depending on exactly where you want these boards. Our MOLLE nuts, along with these MAXTRAX mounts, are gonna make it easier for you to configure and reconfigure, move them around as you figure out how you wanna use your truck. But this is gonna be a great starting point for us. So with that, you have a super clean install of the Rivian MAXTRAX Recovery Board Kit, using just a set of the BuiltRight MOLLE nuts and your BuiltRight MOLLE panels. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, please feel free to reach out via phone, email, social media. We'll meet you where you find us. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Today I'm going to use a set of BuiltRight Industries MOLLE nuts, the Rivian MAXTRAX mounts to mount the Rivian Extreme traction boards. Boy, I stumbled through that. Painful. We're going to use those 2 parts along with a set of the BuiltRight MOLLE nuts to mount this mounting system to our mount. We love to mount. Today we're going to use a set of BuiltRight Industries MOLLE nuts along with the Rivian and MAXTRAX mounts to mount a set of the Rivian MAXTRAX Extreme Recovery Boards, to mount a set of the Rivian MAXTRAX Extreme Recovery Boards. Is that a mouthful? That's a lot. If you watched our last Rivian video, you watched me install our Cab Wall MOLLE panel on our R1T here. You have a good clip of that for sure. If you're feeling sporty, you can get one started on the bottom and you can manage to maneuver him in, but I'm gonna keep it a little bit simple. You like that? That's so funny. I've been wanting to work that into a video, you know? Feeling sporty.